Good morning and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today is Monday, December the 16th. And as you can tell, I traded the background, traded the background of Mexico for New Hampshire. So left, it was about 77, 78. And yesterday I came home and it was just about 19 degrees. So I haven't cracked. I'm still in one piece. So that's all pretty good. I don't know about you, but getting excited for Christmas. It's right around the corner. Can't believe it. I had an opportunity to just take a few days with my bride here, Cindy, and her sister and brother-in-law, and it was really a lot of fun. Ate more than we should, but that's vacation, right? And now we're heading into Christmas, so all bets are off. But trust that you guys are waking up, having feeling good, and having a restful sleep and ready to begin another topic this morning. We are in the third Sunday of Advent. We are in a series called In the Fullness of Time that just takes a look at all of the events leading up to the birth of Christ. In the fullness of time is intimating to you and me that God really, right, is involved of history. It's his story that is unfolding. This idea of God and his providence is an interesting one. Where we look at God, who is first cause, right, creates all things. Some think that somehow or another God's like an old-fashioned alarm clock, where he winds it up and he just sets it and lets it run itself out. But God is so much more involved in the affairs of men, in everyday experiences. It kind of gives us a sense of context for one's whole life. Otherwise, things happen solely by chance. There isn't this divine directive that is working everything towards a determined end. When Jesus said, "Look, I've come to declare to you the kingdom of heaven," right? His whole idea was that you and I would begin to look through Jesus as this lens out into the present and into the future, so that the words that he gave us would inform us on how we are to live, but it would also give us a glimpse of what is yet to come. See, that's only possible because God knows the end from the beginning, that God is superintending all of these things so that it would arrive at his desired end. This past week, I had an opportunity to share a couple of passages of scripture with someone who's, experiencing some difficulty in business, some unexpected twists and turns that have come at the end of the season. And while they're handling it, just biblically, they are handling it in a way that recognizes that God is sovereign. It's still disconcerting, right? Like you're not prepared for the way in which all these things are going to unfold. And I wrote him this text. It says that in Proverbs chapter 16, there's a couple of really beautiful passages that you find there. In Proverbs chapter 16, there is this passage in verse 3, and it says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed." See, when our steps are walking in concert with God's, it's when we're going to experience his blessings, right? That not just blessings in that everything is going to go well, but you experience his peace in the midst of that. So that even Jesus, when we look at his ministry, there were many times, right, that he was experiencing, the evil, the wickedness of this world. But within himself, there was this sense that the Father was always with him. And so this text here is saying what's really important is that as believers in Christ, that we do the next right thing. The next right thing. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, right? Doing the next right thing. And it says your plans will succeed. Ultimately, God is for us and not against us. But how about this one? In Proverbs 16, verse 9, it says, "In his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. See, that shows how we are working in concert, um, under this broader umbrella of God's will and his purposes. You want to make sure that the plans that you are making are in line with God's will and purposes. Because when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, God says he's going to make even his enemies to live at peace with him. So here, what we read in this text is that the planning of my way is one in which I'm always trying to make sure that I am walking in this in God's will. I am doing those things that I know would please him. And yet at the end, I could always rest assured that God is the one who is determining, um, man's steps. That God is going to bring this ultimately for the good. That evil will be judged. That the good will prevail. That righteousness will always, be under the purview of God Himself. So these are great passages, just set to remind us again of God's will and His purposes for us. So, I want to look at you, with you this morning, and take a passage from Matthew chapter 2, I'd like to read, this story of the wise men. It's the first 12 verses here in the text, because we're going to be talking about these Magi, as they are called in the scriptures here, and traditionally people call them the wise men, right? So after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" Notice that the text here, it's speaking of something that has happened in the past. Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? So this birth has already taken place. I know. All the Christmas cards, they come with Jesus and Mary, the baby, the shepherds, the animals, and the Magi. They're all there together. But that's not really historically accurate. The Magi come after the birth of Jesus. They're not coming to the manger in Bethlehem to find him. But notice it goes on here, and it says, "We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." So these Magi, they have come, as we see here now, from the east, right? And when this star arose, they came. And they said, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ, the Messiah, right, was to be born. And notice what they say. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written." So this coming Messiah, they knew, based on what God already had detailed to them back in the book of Micah in chapter 5 and verse 2, one of your Old Testament books. It writes this. It says, "But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." So this ruler, this shepherd, has already been announced by the angels to Mary, to Joseph, right? To Simeon, to Anna. This is none other than this baby Jesus, whose name was given that he would what? Save his people from their sins. This is the ruler that has come. Simeon said it's going to be the rising and falling of many in Jerusalem. He is to be this light to the Gentiles, right? and he is the consolation of Israel. And what's going to bring comfort and peace. This is what Israel has been waiting for. And so the teachers of the law, the priests, they understood this messianic promise, and this is many centuries later. So Herod calls the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." So it sounds like everything's great. Magi, they came, they got what they were looking for. They're looking for direction. They found it. Isn't it interesting too that they are motivated by this star that seemed to inform them of the reality of the Christ child being born? But they don't have much more than that. And so they are pursuing, they are asking questions, they are trying to find this child that is to be born king of the Jews. So Herod sends them on their way, says, "Hey, go find out where he is, do the hard work for me, and then tell me where he is so that I too may worship him." But as in every good suspense here, right? It says, after they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, notice it's the house. It's not the inn. It's not the inn where Jesus was laid in a manger. It says, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and myrrh. By the way, those three gifts are usually where we get the conclusion that there were three wise men. And the giving of their names is all mythological. Like, the names are never given to us. We're not even told how many there were. What we are told is that there were three gifts of gold, incense, and myrrh. But then they said, having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. You see, what they weren't assured of was what was in a dream, and tells them to get up and to take the child, escape to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. And so he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. Herod was older, as we're going to see in a moment. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." This is a text from the book of Hosea that speaks about Israel being delivered. When was the last time Israel was delivered out of Egypt? You remember that story? I think you do, right? It's all about Moses. But here we have a new Moses who's coming. And he is going to be the one who is going to bring about this consolation of Israel. He's the one that will be the light to the Gentiles. He's the one that's going to fulfill the promise that God gave all the way back to Abraham when he said, "Abraham, through your descendant, I am going to bless all the nations of the world." And that was what Simeon understood. That is what Anna understood. He was not just the king of the Jews, he was the king of kings and Lord of lords. But Herod realizes that he had been outwitted by the Magi, and he's furious. He gives orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under. In accordance with the time, he had learned from the Magi. You see that? So, how many events are taking place in real time? In other words, this is the life, right, of Mary and Joseph, Jesus, all of the people that they're interacting with. These are how these events are beginning to unfold. What's interesting, though, in our text is that you begin to realize that people are having different responses. The Magi are there to worship him. The Herod, King Herod, he's threatened by them. And this idea of killing the children 2 years of age and under shows you that this child, it was not just a baby, and Herod is making sure that this king is never going to really disturb his throne, and so he makes sure that those 2 years of age and under are will be killed, all the boys. So there is Matthew then is sharing with us another truth here. And so as we read the story of the wise men who found Jesus, we're going to discover that their story is entwined in the story of the saints of every generation who seek to know Jesus. And I think we're going to get an answer to a question: how did they find Jesus? Morphs into how can we find Jesus, right? You know, they did their work back then. What is the work that we need to do in the days in which we're living? So here we have, after Jesus was born, right? Again, God is the one who is initiating revelation here. God is the one who, as you saw with Mary, he sends Gabriel, the angel, right? We don't know how God specifically spoke to Simeon, but we learned last week that it was revealed to him that he would not die until he saw the Lord's Messiah, right? We learned also that Anna had been widowed 7 years after she was married, and so she was in her 80s. So you see that for years and years and years she had been a widow, also waiting for this consolation of Israel to take place. Joseph received direction in a dream, and now we have the Magi receiving revelation based on a star. It says in the text that they came from the east to Jerusalem, and their place of origin, though, is really not that clear. Some people think that it's Persian because the word Magi is from Iranian origin. So the word itself may very well be a reference to Persia. Some think that they were Babylonian astrologers. Their wise men have been credited with establishing the foundation of the planetary system, time computation, even the calendar. So these astrologers, they were very bright and very observant, and it has affected cultures from the things that they have learned, right? But there's no doubt the Jews, dispersed by conquering nations of Babylon and Persia, spread their hope and anticipation of this promised Messiah, the Christ. And so I want you to think with me for a moment of the writings of those who wrote under the occupation of either Babylon or Persia. So let me take a step back, just so that we're clear here, right? We have these wise men coming from the east, perhaps from Babylonian origin, perhaps Persian, but both Babylon and Persia had at one time overcome the nation of Israel. The Babylonians under the king Nebuchadnezzar came and absolutely destroyed the nation of Judah, right? They took Jerusalem and the city. They burned down the city gates and destroyed the temple so that one stone did not lay on another. This magnificent temple that Solomon had dedicated has now fallen to the ground and is burned. The centerpiece of Israel's worship center was destroyed by the Babylonians. And then, less than 100 years later, what you find, the Persians come and they beat up on the Babylonians, and they conquer even more land than the Babylonians did. Only the Persians allow the Jews to go back into their land and to begin to reestablish themselves. Now, the Persians, they set up a system whereby all of these colonies would bring tribute, tax money back to Persia. So it wasn't like they didn't have, ulterior motives here, but they did have a different type of foreign policy where Babylon took all of its captives and dispersed them all over their empire. The Persians allowed those who were conquered to go back into their lands. And all of this was working in concert with what God had determined. You remember when God, when Babylon was about to overcome, Jerusalem, the prophet Jeremiah lifted his voice and gave warning that this was coming. Isaiah did the same. In fact, there's that very famous verse that I'm sure many of you know, right? It's from Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. That text, found in Jeremiah 29:11, is God's way of saying, listen, I'm going to take care of you. But for the next 70 years, you're going to be held captive by the Babylonians. But he's telling them before this happens that he knows the plans that he has for them to give them a hope and a future. And so who is the one then is holding history in his hands? Remember, we read a few moments ago from Proverbs 16. It says, a man's heart devises his way, but the Lord directs his steps. God is always in charge of history. And so here, what we have is in the nation of Israel, the overcoming of Babylon and Persia was also written about by many of the prophets. So Jeremiah wrote about it. Isaiah wrote about it. Daniel wrote about it, right? Ezekiel wrote about it. What about the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah? Now, why am I telling you this? Because this is the way in which God took the seeds of this good news that he was working through the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was taking this, and that revelation now is being spread all over the world. And no doubt, these Magi, who are from the East, perhaps as far away as Iran, they are intrigued by God's revelation. And when God brings them this star, God is very deliberate. He brought an angel, Gabriel, to Mary, another angel to Joseph in a dream. Shepherds, what did he do? He said an angel in a choir. And now it's a star. Now, they came in pursuit of an answer. Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? They came with a mission. We have come to worship him. But we're given a hint in our text, right? That not all is well in Jerusalem, because when you look at Matthew chapter 2, verse 3, it says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. So not everybody has the same reaction to this announcement that the birth of Jesus is upon them. And so what I try to do this morning is just begin to tee up this story so that you begin to recognize that God is now not only giving revelation to Mary, Joseph, shepherds, Simeon, Anna, all these people who are involved in the nation of Israel, but because God knows that his son is going to be the light to the Gentiles, he's also raising up Gentiles who live all the way in the east. They're not beyond God's reach. And this revelation now hits them, and they are on their way so they can discover who this one is that was born King of the Jews, so that they might worship him. Well, we're going to learn a lot more from this story, but I just want to leave it here today to just reveal to us again in this season of Christmas that this birth of Jesus was brought about with much fanfare, God directly engaging the world in space and in time, because as it said in Galatians 4:4, in the fullness of time God sent forth his son. See, there had to be things that were taking place. All of the history of God working with his people are all coming to this big crescendo in the sending of his son, Jesus. And in the coming of Jesus, it's for the redemption of the world. God is about to reconcile fallen humanity back to himself. He's going to take the message that Jesus is bringing and open up a gate so that we can enter into this narrow way and find life and find it abundant. What a great gift God is giving to his people. That, my friends, is what we worship on Christmas. It's not the parties, right? It's not the presents. All of that is fine, and it's fun, and yet at the same time we got to make sure that we don't render the work of Jesus into something that is less. But we're recognizing by all these stories that we're telling, preparing ourselves for the coming of this birth, what really has taken place in space and in time, that God is on the move, and he is bringing now his own son to reconcile a lost world back into himself. And we know, having done that by his death on the cross, we are awaiting now what? His second coming, where he is going to make all things new. What great news to wake up to this morning on this Monday, December the 16th. I trust it just sticks with you, causes you to seize the day, and it makes you recognize it. God is good all the time. Well, I'm glad to be home. I'm looking forward to the week as we get closer and closer to Christmas. And make sure you get on our website, bethanychurch.com. There you'll find all the times for our Christmas Eve services across all of our campuses. And I just trust that, Lord willing, we'll have more time to spend tomorrow. So God bless you, my friends. Look forward to tomorrow.